All right, strap in, everybody. We're going deep into a world most of us only see on TV.
The world of medical examiners.
You got it. Autopsies, sudden deaths, and those,
How did that happen?
mysteries. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're diving into a documentary called Dead Men Talking, Eternal Neighbors, and we'll be spending time with Dr. Daniel Spitz, a medical examiner in Michigan.
That's right.
And we're not just going to be hearing about some pretty intense cases. We're going to be uncovering how death investigations actually work, the emotional roller coaster that families go through, and
Right.
the ethical tightropes medical examiners walk every day.
I think you'll find it's more than just morbid curiosity. It really makes you think about life and death and everything in between.
Okay, so first up is the case of Jill Moore. Now imagine this. You're 44 years old, you go in for a routine dental cleaning, and suddenly you're experiencing jaw pain and headaches. Before you know it, you're in the ER, and just as they're about to send you home, bam, you die.
Yeah.
Shocking, right? What would you think happened?
Yeah, most people would probably assume that something went wrong during the dental procedure. A tragic mistake. But this case takes a fascinating turn.
It really does. Dr. Spitz starts the autopsy like he always does, a methodical external exam, followed by the internal exam. No obvious signs on the outside, but then he finds a small amount of blood in her abdomen.
Okay.
Could this be the answer?
Well, remember, they had been performing CPR in the ER, so some internal bleeding from that is expected.
Ah, good point, good point. So the plot thickens. The real shocker comes when Dr. Spitz examines the heart. There's a major blockage in a coronary artery. Turns out Jill Moore died from a heart attack she didn't even know she was having.
Yeah, and it's a twist that highlights a crucial point about women and heart attacks. They often experience them differently than men, with what doctors call atypical symptoms. Things like jaw pain or nausea that you might not immediately associate with a heart problem.
Wow, that's a really interesting point about atypical symptoms. I have to admit, I would not have thought of jaw pain as a heart attack sign.
It's a common misconception, and in Jill's case, the coincidence of the dental visit probably threw everyone off.
Yeah.
But what's even more thought-provoking is the ethical dilemma this presents for Dr. Spitz.
Oh, I bet. He's got to be thinking about more than just the autopsy at this point.
Exactly. He feels a responsibility to reach out to Jill's family, not only to give them answers about her death, but also to warn them about potential genetic risk factors. It raises a fascinating question for you. Where does a medical examiner's responsibility end? Is it purely about the deceased, or does it extend to the living who might be at risk?
That's a tough one. I mean, on the one hand, wouldn't you want to know if you were at risk? Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. Early detection and intervention can be life-saving in many cases. But on the other hand, imagine the anxiety and fear that knowledge could bring.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a lot to grapple with. So what happened when Dr. Spitz contacted Jill's family?
Well, her husband was completely blindsided. There was no known history of heart disease in the family. Now he's urging everyone to get checked out, trying to find some meaning in this tragedy. It's a reminder that death investigations don't exist in a vacuum. They ripple outwards, affecting lives in unexpected ways.
Okay, on to our next case. It's a complete 180 from Jill Moore's story. We meet Ryan Sadowski, a 19-year-old man found hanging in his grandparents' garage. On the surface, it seems like a straightforward suicide.
And yet Dr. Spitz chooses to perform a full autopsy. You might be wondering why.
I definitely was. I mean, wouldn't the circumstances be clear enough?
That's where it gets interesting. It's not just about confirming the cause of death. Autopsies can uncover crucial information that helps protect the living, like genetic predispositions to certain conditions. This highlights a point that you might find surprising. Autopsies aren't just about the dead. They can help the living, even in cases like this.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. It's like a ripple effect, even in a situation as tragic as suicide.
That's right. So in Ryan's case, the autopsy didn't reveal any significant natural disease, confirming it was a tragic decision.
Ryan's case was heartbreaking. A young life cut short. But sometimes death investigations reveal more complex circumstances, like in the case of Jihad Surer.
Ah, yes, Jihad Surer. This case takes a strange turn.
Okay.
Imagine this. You're Dr. Spitz, you're out boating on Lake St. Clair with your family, enjoying a beautiful day, and suddenly, just a short distance away, a man drowns. Talk about a coincidence.
That's crazy, but wouldn't most drownings be pretty straightforward? I mean, it's not like there's a lot of mystery about how someone ended up in the water.
Well, that's what makes this case so intriguing. You see, things aren't always as they appear. It could have been a medical event that happened while he was in the water, or
Oh,
even foul play disguised as a drowning.
whoa, I see what you mean. So even a drowning isn't always a simple open and shut case.
Exactly, and that's why Dr. Spitz is so meticulous. They take a photograph of the deceased to help with identification and then transport the body for a full autopsy. The key is gathering all the facts before jumping to any conclusions.
Okay, so what did the autopsy reveal? Was it really just an unfortunate accident?
In the end, yes. The autopsy confirmed it was an accidental drowning. Most likely he got swept out by the tide and entangled in seaweed, tragically unable to free himself.
Oh man, that's awful. It's one thing to drown, but to be trapped underwater like that.
It's heartbreaking, and his wife's reaction really underscores the profound impact of sudden loss. You could almost feel the shock and disbelief through the audio.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, how do medical examiners deal with that emotional weight day after day?
I can't imagine it's easy. They're not just dealing with the science. They're face to face with the human cost of these tragedies.
You're absolutely right. It takes a special kind of person to do that job,
Yeah.
to compartmentalize the emotional side while still maintaining empathy for the families.
Speaking of families, I remember there was a powerful moment with Jihad's wife.
Yes, amidst her grief, she issued a call to action. Clean up the seaweed to prevent future tragedies.
Wow.
It was incredibly moving, even in the face of such loss. She was looking for a way to make a difference to protect others from suffering the same fate.
It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, that ability to find meaning and purpose even in the darkest of times.
Absolutely. It speaks to the profound impact death has, not just on individuals, but on communities as a whole.
Okay, ready for our final case in this deep dive. This one takes us back to the autopsy table with Providence Marie Markham, a 47-year-old woman who collapsed and died at home 13 days after hernia surgery. Sounds pretty routine, right?
You'd think so, Anya. But what Dr. Spitz discovered during the autopsy was anything but routine. This one's not for the faint of heart, so be warned.
Oh boy, here we go.
Her abdomen was filled with fecal matter and showing clear signs of severe infection.
Okay, I have to admit, I skipped lunch before recording this deep dive. The description is vivid. What on earth happened to her?
Dr. Spitz determined that her intestine had perforated, leading to peritonitis.
Peritonitis? That doesn't sound good.
It's not. It's a serious infection of the lining of the abdomen, and it can be deadly. In Providence's case, it led to septic shock, essentially a cascade of complications that overwhelmed her body.
And I remember correctly, her husband mentioned that she hadn't been feeling well after the surgery and was hesitant to go home.
Yes, and he claimed the doctor dismissed their concerns and essentially sent her home to die.
Well, that adds a whole other layer to this case.
Nah.
It's one thing to die from complications, but to feel like your concerns weren't taken seriously.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that communication between patients and doctors is crucial, especially after surgery. You have to advocate for yourself and speak up if something doesn't feel right.
So what happened next? Did her husband take any action?
He did. He filed a lawsuit against the doctor, alleging that he was negligent in her care.
Okay,
Essentially, he's claiming the doctor didn't do enough to diagnose and treat her condition.
that makes sense. It's heartbreaking because it seems like her death might have been preventable if someone had listened to her concerns.
It raises some tough questions about accountability within the medical system, and it highlights the emotional toll these situations take on families. Imagine the anger and frustration her husband must be feeling.
It's easy to understand why he'd want answers and justice. But let's be clear, the medical examiner's role isn't to assign blame.
Exactly. Their job is to determine the cause and manner of death, not to point fingers. However, their findings can play a crucial role in legal proceedings like this.
So we've covered 4 very different cases in this deep dive, each one offering a unique glimpse into the world of medical examiners.
It's more than just autopsies and technical details. We've seen how these investigations can uncover hidden truths, impact families in profound ways, and even spark change in the community.
And for me, it's really highlighted the importance of clear communication, both between patients and doctors, and between medical examiners and families.
I think that's a valuable takeaway. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The emotional toll this work takes on medical examiners themselves. Remember how Dr. Spitz mentioned he tries not to take his work home with him?
Right. He said it was for the sake of his own family and mental well-being. But I can't imagine that's easy. They're exposed to death and tragedy on a daily basis.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how someone in that profession maintains their own sense of balance, their own perspective on life and death.
It also makes you realize how precious life is and how quickly things can change.
That's a powerful insight, and it brings us to the end of our exploration of dead men talking, eternal neighbors.
But before we go, I have to ask, what's that thought-provoking question you mentioned earlier, the one we should all be pondering as we go about our day?
Well, it goes back to Jill Moore, the woman who died from a heart attack she didn't even know she was having. Her death prompted Dr. Spitz to contact her family about potential genetic risks. So the question for you is this: would you want to know if you were at risk for a sudden medical event like that?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's like a double-edged sword, right? Knowing could give you a chance to make changes, get ahead of it, but it could also freak you out.
Exactly. Early detection and intervention could be life-saving.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, that knowledge could also lead to a lot of anxiety, fear, or even a sense of fatalism. It could change how you live your life, maybe even for the worse.
It makes you think about those what-if scenarios. Would you rather live in blissful ignorance or face the potential risk head-on? It's a personal choice for sure.
There's no right or wrong answer. It all comes down to individual values, risk tolerance, and how you personally cope with uncertainty. Some people might find comfort in knowing, while others would prefer to live without that burden.
Yeah. This deep dive has really made me appreciate the complexities of death investigations. It's so much more than just science and procedures. There are ethical dilemmas, emotional impacts, and ripple effects that extend far beyond the autopsy table.
And it's not just about the dead, as we've seen with Ryan Sadowski's case. Autopsies can provide crucial information that helps protect the living, like genetic predispositions. It's a reminder that we're all connected in ways we might not always realize.
We got a real sense of that interconnectedness from the documentary, especially hearing the voices of the families, the raw grief, the search for answers, the unexpected calls to action. It's a powerful reminder of the human side of these tragedies.
And it underscores the importance of empathy, understanding, and compassion, not just for those who've lost loved ones, but for the medical professionals who navigate these difficult situations every day.
Well, I think that's a wrap on our deep dive into Dead Men Talking, Eternal Neighbors. We covered a lot of ground today, from the technicalities of autopsies to the ethical dilemmas faced by medical examiners, and we even got a little philosophical there at the end.
It's all connected, isn't it? Life, death, the choices we make, the knowledge we seek, the impact we have on others. Hopefully this deep dive has left you with some things to ponder.
It definitely has for me. And for you listening, I encourage you to think about that question we posed earlier. Would you want to know if you were at risk for a sudden medical event? There's no easy answer, but it's worth exploring.
Until next time, stay curious, keep those brains engaged, and remember, every life is a story.
And that's our show for today. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.